Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Terry James Gingrass, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat. It's a show trying to make the world safe for ADHD. I am a neuropsychologist and clinical psychologist in private practice. A good portion of my clientele, if you will, is ADHDers. Seem to be doing more adult than child ADHDers right now, but that fluctuates. And I'm also the parent of an ADHD adult. And I can freely say that I have probably made every mistake anybody out there has made with raising their ADHD kids. Back when I was a young parent of a young child, we just didn't know that much about ADHD. I've said this every week, I think, but I managed to make it through a entire American Psychological Association approved graduate program and the internship after that without ever once hearing about ADHD. I did not know there was such a thing. I did not know it existed. When somebody first told me about that, I thought, sure. But I am now a firm believer. I know it exists. I know it can do a lot of things, cause a lot of problems. But I also know it doesn't cause everything. Okay? Every issue in a person's life, any person's life, is not caused by having ADHD. Let's you look at it, and there are some people with ADHD who are very successful, and some of them actually credit having ADHD with the fact that they're so productive. I think that's probably a bit of a stretch, but I do believe that some of them have really learned how to manage and use their ADHD in ways that are pretty much helpful to their business. And I also think it so happens that what they are naturally interested in is basically what they do for a living, which I think is a wonderful way to live, frankly. I'll let you know a secret. When I had graduated from college, hey y'all, thank you. Okay. Anyway, I had an undergraduate degree in journalism and with a concentration in advertising and a secondary major in there's some disagreement about that, in political science. My plan was to become a Washington correspondent and write a political column and da-da-da-da-da. Well, on the theory that, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Somehow, through the course of wandering around in my life, I became a clinical psychologist, which the more I think about it, the more I think it's just perfect, except for my original sort of 1950s, I'm not that old, honest, male sort of way of looking at careers and vocations. But I'm a psychologist, neuropsychologist, love it. Frankly, can't imagine retiring, but I know that's going to come someday. But one of the things I notice as I read around in different Facebook groups and different popular media of different kinds with an ADHD possibility, or possibility? Anyway, that's what happens when I try to read comments at the same time I talk. basically, people will, some of what I've been doing this a long time. I've got about 35, 40 years in doing ADHD stuff. And I am but constantly amazed at people what they think ADHD might be causing and what it might not be causing. Okay? Understand, ADHD, as we currently understand it, is a slight metabolic difference in the way the brain handles neurotransmitters. And basically, the one we blame most is dopamine. Is that ADHD brains tend to metabolize dopamine faster than folks who don't have ADHD, faster than us neurotypical types. And Jill, that's an excellent question. I'm not entirely sure. Let's just say I've learned to compensate. I look at my family line, and I have a lot of folks there who probably were or are, and my wife definitely has a bunch. So, who knows? I made pretty much all the mistakes that ADHDers usually make before I landed in something I really like. I guess the difference is that I always like to read, and I always, most of the time I was reading science fiction and that kind of fantasy stuff, but I did not have a huge problem with most academic subjects. There were some I fell to my hand more easily than others. And usually before I could do some topics, I would find myself having to figure out a way to sort of convince myself that it was worth doing, that it was important to me to do it. But once I did that, I pretty much was able to, to at least muscle my way through it. There were a lot of things, a lot of courses, a lot of topics, a lot of subjects I had more troubles with, but I still managed to get adequate or probably better than average grades. But that's a good question, and for some reason I don't know why I never bothered to try to answer that. But what I am getting back to what I was going to talk about is that some of the folks with ADHD are not sure what the exact limits are, okay? We pretty much know that it appears to be mainly evidenced by difficulties with controlling attention and impulsivity. And those are both kind of control things. Even the attention thing is more of a control issue than it is just because ADHDers are pretty well known for being able to concentrate like crazy on the stuff they like, and not so much on stuff they don't like. So, that helps them out a lot of times, because then they have a tendency to focus on the stuff they do like. And if that also happens to be an area where they decide they're going to make a living, it's kind of a beautiful marriage. But I can't guarantee you that happens to everybody. Well, no, it doesn't happen to everybody. I see most of the casualties, I think, the folks who didn't get that. But ADHD, like I said, doesn't cause everything. I mean, there's a high incidence of anxiety and depression in ADHD people. But when you look at the situation ADHDers are in, typically, where they're, at least through their education, they are in a system that wasn't really designed for the way they think about things. And the original reason for public education was to provide workers, for mills and that sort of stuff. So you needed folks with a medium amount of training, but not necessarily much training in creative word problem solving and that sort of thing. So it's still, and it's changed, and they're trying to keep up, but it's still largely a system that's based more on compliance than brilliance. That getting this job done on time the way you were asked to do it is more important than that you come up with some brilliant insight or create a new way of looking at things or any of that stuff. That's just not part of what your education is typically going to tell you. And I think you see it sometimes, even at very high levels. There are some people that you look at who have lots of letters after their names, shall we say, and you think, this guy's a dolt. He has got no judgment at all. He's, or she, they don't seem to be able to see a new way of doing things, and they don't have much patience with new ways of doing things. And I think that's a process that we have started training out of people in some education systems. I think the better ones, they shouldn't do that, shall we say? Because I think we lose something when people have to settle and don't do what they could do, that aren't rewarded for novel ways of looking at things, for novel problem-solving solutions, that sort of stuff. And you get what you get, though. I think is you get a lot of scared people, and they're especially parents. And we have a lot of research suggesting that if you want to have a lot of stress in your life, or you want to be less satisfied with life, have an ADHD child, and that'll probably do it for you. You're going to spend perhaps the rest of your life worried about that one child, or if maybe a couple of them, depending. But it's like there's a recent article I saw that suggested that ADHDers who are not medicated have a higher risk of the COVID virus, COVID-19, than other people, atypicals, neurotypicals. Gosh, I wonder why. Do you think the ADHD increases their susceptibility to the coronavirus? Or do you think their ADHD, especially when they're not medicated and are out doing crazy, wild, wonderful, fun things that they tend to do, increases their exposure to the coronavirus? Okay. I saw one article not too long ago about a mother who was wondering if her son's preference for, I guess we'd call them girls stuff, dolls and fabrics and colors and things like that, was related to his ADHD. No, ma'am, it's not. There are some other things going on there. And, what you do about that is sort of dependent on what you believe about all sorts of things. Parenting and teaching are two of the main obstacles that ADHDers have to get through. Parents, it's a two-way. A lot of how harsh the parents are increases the amount of behavior acting out you're going to see in the home. Okay? So if you're super strict, you're more likely to see ADHD behaviors in the home. Well, imagine my surprise. Okay, now I live in an area that's got a lot of military and retired military and that sort of stuff. And I know from personal experience that you go to work all day and you're telling the troops what to do, and they're jumping to and doing exactly what you say. It's a little hard when you get home and little hoo-hoo says, no, I'm not going to do that. If you're a military person, that's not something you hear very much. So you may tend to overreact to that. But the deal with all of that is parenting is so important to parenting, and especially of ADHD kids. I mean, it's you can make it so life is pretty easy, and you can make it so life is pretty hard. Somewhat surprisingly, or maybe not, the folks who tend to be harsher and stricter with their kids tend to be the ones who don't want to treat their children. He's just a normal boy. She's just got a good imagination. That's why she's in a trance during most of the time she's in school. That kind of thing. They tend to, the parents can determine a lot about how life is going to turn out. Okay, and I think I've talked several times on this show about it. The ones that tear at me, the patients that I see, are the ones who come in their 30s, and they have a track record of having difficulties with relationships, keeping jobs, and are frustrated and typically are being treated for anxiety and depression. Whether or not that's ever the primary reason for things or not, I don't know. But they, they're sick of not being able to have as full a life, I guess I'd say, as they could have. And a lot of them were diagnosed when they were, at an appropriate age for treatment to start, and either their parents didn't want to treat them, didn't want to drug their children. I love that one. So then they waited until they were in their 30s and got fed up and frustrated and depressed enough that they start looking for help. Or what happens a lot of times is they were treated, things were going pretty well, then they hit high school when, of course, everybody who hits high school knows everything about everything, and refuse to take the medication any longer. So, in general, we look at ADHD and medication. I mean, medication is by far the quickest, most efficient way of treating ADHD. But you got to have a doc who knows what he's doing. You've got to, hardest thing about ADHD meds is getting the right dosage. You put them on too little, it doesn't seem to be doing much of anything. You put them on too much, and they zombie out on you. And that's not a normal side effect of the medication. That's having the wrong dosage, having basically too much on board typically. So what you want is, you need to have an evaluator who knows what he or she's doing, so they give you a complete and thorough workup, and then you need a doc who's good with the medications. Basically, it's a lot of times past a certain point, it's more of an art form than it is a science. But you have got to have enough contact with your patients when they're first starting on the medication that you can modify the dosage, what they call titration. You got to get the right dosage. You can't just jam, hey, looks like about 30 milligrams. It doesn't work that way, okay? Metabolic rates vary highly, and sensitivity rates vary highly. And even the ADHD varies. ADHD is sort of normally distributed. You can have a whole boatload of it, and when you've got that much, a lot of times it's, if you did, how did you ever make it through high school? Or you can have just a little bit of it, and you can sort of either learn to deal with it, or you can never even know for sure that you got it. There are people like that. And I think you've got to make allowances for that. That there are some folks who just have a little bit of it, and more behavioral techniques and strategies, and just having a high protein diet and getting a lot of exercise. That may be all you need. But I can tell you, even from just an evaluation, from just performance on the kind of evaluation I give, I can tell how much you've got. And if you've got a whole bunch, you might as well just save yourself some time and go on medication, or put your child on medication. There's nothing that keeps you from not working with it later on and seeing if maybe something's improved. But typically what happens is, with age, the only thing that you get less of is less overt hyperactivity. Okay? The inattention stuff and the mind going 90 miles an hour kind of thing, that tends to be a lifelonger. And that's what you're going to do. That's it's just what you have to adapt and adjust to. Okay, so ADHD specifically causes difficulties with control of attention. I usually like to put it that way, because it's not just attention. If it were attention, you couldn't pay attention to anything. But it's that you can't pay attention to stuff you're not very interested in, and the impulsivity. And that can be an issue all through life, although the overt behavior stuff where you're all fidgety and running around the room and that kind of stuff, that tends to go away. Although if you look at a person who's got ADHD, you'll see usually some kind of, foot tapping or finger tapping, or some kind of notion that their bodies are a little impatient with being where they are. Anyway, so it doesn't cause everything. It even does not directly cause anxiety and depression, although if you were an ADHD kid and you're on your own and never get any treatment or anything like that, there's a better than average shot that you'll end up with some kind of anxiety and or depression. But the ADHD doesn't cause the depression or the anxiety. It just is a cohort kind of thing. It goes at the same place, just because it's tough living, especially in school, with ADHD without treatment. Okay, so it doesn't cause everything. It certainly doesn't cause it doesn't cause some things that are just interest stuff. It doesn't make you more likely to like blue than green, or more likely to like football than. I take that one back. I think it is more likely to make you like football, because you love the contact and you love the aggressiveness of it, kind of thing. But some of the softer, what kind of people you choose to hang out with, there is a tendency to hang out with the same kind of people as you are, but I think we all have that. Anyway, so it is not a life sentence to anything. Okay, basically you pick things like everybody else picks things, but the thing you need to be noticing, and the thing as a parent you need to be noticing, is what are strengths? What does this kid have going for him or her? What are the strengths? What are the abilities? And develop those. Encourage the heck out of those, because those are probably going to be the ones that they end up working in, and then they may have kind of a blessing, because they actually are working in an area that they love. And the thing you've got to watch out for is they don't want them to be an accountant because everybody else in the family is an accountant. I mean, there are some ADHD folks who just love the numbers and all that stuff, and so ADHD works out. I mean, accounting works out for them. But there are a sizable number of them who are bored to tears by rows of numbers and columns. So, just be aware of that. Use it to your benefit. Thank you for watching. And, oh, hey. Hi, Stacy. Okay, I will catch you later on. This is Dr. G's ADHD chat show, trying to make the world safe for ADHDers, and we will catch you next week. My website is terrygingrassphd.com, and we're coming out with some interesting new things in a month or so, so I'll be talking with you more about that. What a... Well, Jill, I have a comment here about what's the value of keeping the number of symptoms or whatever. Well, I think that you get people who are panicked by their ADHD or by their child's ADHD, and that causes distress and feelings of helplessness and all that sort of thing. I mean, science is about knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know and knowing what is and knowing what isn't. If you keep trying to make one thing the cause of everything, it's going to be an issue, and it's going to make everything harder. Okay, you've got to be realistic about what's causing difficulties, and then you've got to work on what are you going to do about it. If you're working on a bunch of things that don't have anything to do with, say, your ADHD, that's probably a time waster. Okay, let it go at that, and we will catch you next time. Bye.